Good afternoon, everybody. Rafael, tecnica.antica.com. And today's video is actually not so old, all right? So it's something more contemporary, but it's something I've been wanting to do for ages now. And it's a video on belting and the whole Broadway singing and West End singing, musical theater slash pop, folk, rock, whatever. Now, how could we start this without making it so obvious that as a classical singer or as a classical singing teacher, I would be talking about belting and contemporary singing. Well, mind you, back in the day when I was studying with McRae, I remember that the entire department of the Tilburg music school or conservatoire, whatever you want to call it, used to go to James for lessons. Thus, what they preached back in the day, I don't know how it is nowadays, in Tilburg is actually what McRae taught them. And now you might say, wow, but this is like opera singing, sort of modified towards music theater. No, it's basically it's exactly the same principle with a few modifications here and there. Now, before I go on, I must tell you that James McRae was an excellent crooner, and he used to tell me how he had to make a big decision when I believe he was in New York, because he was offered a contract in Las Vegas to actually perform in one of those shows. Along, Frank Sinatra was singing at the time, Elvis was singing at the time, so he had the chance to become a crooner in Vegas, but he decided that he didn't want it. It's a bit like when they came up to me with this Il Divo business, because I did tons of demos for Bocelli and Pavarotti and Russell Watson and I don't know who else, but I did all of that back in the day, and the name just got threw over the system. So anyway, what I want to say is that just because I might be a classical singer and this is sort of a classical technique, you still can benefit from it when you are belting. So what is belting? I actually wanted to check out the scenery, what's going on, especially on YouTube with tutorials and the whole lot, and I had to stop because immediately everybody went and then I said, that's not belting, that's just overemphasizing twang and actually driving it through. And I do not agree. And in fact, if you take a look at some books that I have, I had for back in the days when I was living in London, you have this one by Gillian Case, and this is the whole like Joe Steele school. And of course there's twang, but you have in a way two types of twang. You have this sort of a mask, facial twang, and then you have what we call oral twang, and I would go for that one because it's basically a pharyngeal sound. So let me try to regroup here. So belting is essentially yelling. It's what some people call the call of the voice, which is basically screaming. For these authors, such as Case, is you have sort of speech, sort of voice quality, then you have the cry quality, then you have belting quality, and then finally you have what they call legit quality, which is opera singing. For us, there is open singing and there is covered singing. To put it in a nutshell. Why? Because if you have to think about all those things that they state in, for example, these books, or some instructional videos I've checked out, I think you'll be thinking so much you will be unable to actually produce a note. So with all this said, you know, the whole support mechanism and the entire sort of breathing control and all that, it's just it would be repetitive to go through that because the principles are exactly the same. So what is basically belting? It's open singing. So you are going to open. And what are the dangers with that? That you might spread too much. In women, right, and this is something I actually support in some of the videos I went through, is that women are very scared of belting because of the money note, because all of a sudden they discovered that going into their head voice, which basically is a production, and these people would say that is thin falls, you get out of your call, right? So your belting register, so to speak, basically out of your chest voice in order to accommodate those high notes in head voice. I do agree, and I've went through the subject, you know, I think at depth in another video. But basically, it's like you know, an educated yell. Belting is sort of screaming, but knowing how to scream. Now, what are the difference then between classical singing and belting? Well, belting is going to be a more horizontal sound, because if you want to go science here, you're going to say that the larynx is tilted, or basically the thyroid cartilage is tilted, whilst in belting the larynx is not lowered or tilted. It is more of in a neutral sort of speech level, and the cricoid thyroid is the one that is tilted forwards. Now obviously this is really difficult to see in, I don't know, in one of the images and stuff, but it's a kind of a sensation. It's an open sound or it's a cover sound. And obviously this is a big gray area, because you have some musical theater roles that would require more of a classical singing into that, especially like the old-fashioned ones, or the ones that have a theme, such as, for example, the Phantom of the Opera. So people that would perform either the role of Eric and the role of Christine and the role of Raoul in the Phantom of the Opera, not to mention the soprano role, I believe is Flora, right? Those people ideally should have some sort of classical training. Christine for sure, but you know, so mind you, if you find Les Miserables, for example, Les Mis also is kind of a classical orientated musical, but then you find yourself, I don't know, Miss Saigon, or you find some Schönheim, even, you know, that for me are basically contemporary operas, and you're going to require a different kind of sound. So for a tenor, it would be something like, if I do this arpeggio, and so F sharp to F sharp, and I would go all opera, you know, on an A, right? Because for belting, I usually use A and E to get that sort of cricoid sensation there, and then I'll explain the mechanism. So if I go all opera in here, and I would sort of open cover the F, I would go la. Okay, so it's a more, is a darker sound. Whilst if I go all belty, la. So basically, the belt, it's an open sound. Does that mean that I am using more air pressure? Possibly because of that thyroid mechanism. But am I changing anything in terms of support? No. Absolutely not. Am I giving more? No, it's a question of coordination. Okay? So, as I always said, cover covering is a mechanism, it's a protective mechanism. Everything has to do with stretching the folds, you know, with the cricothyroid. But again, that tilt is different. I am keeping a more horizontal sound when I belt, when I yell. As you ascend, the sound is going to be thinner and deeper. It's not going to remain the same. Otherwise, you're going to spread the sound and you're going to wreck yourself. So, I have some students nowadays preparing some musical theater stuff, and some students that are singing pop and others are singing rock. So, if I went to sing, for example, Bui Doi, right, Miss Saigon, which goes pretty high, and actually I found some recordings of this and breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. The only thing I would say is that many singers emphasize this twang, like facial twang, forward placement, and I believe they ruin the quality of the belt if you compare to the good old days. Sorry, that's my take. We have here, like, we have this phrase here. They call Bui Doi the dust of life, conceived in hell and born. See that A flat? Born is strife. That's belting. That is much more open than what I would normally do when I sing classical. If I were to approach this from a classical point of view, I immediately would go much more darker. I would make sure that my larynx is really tilt and lower, and it would sound a bit like this. They call Bui Doi, something like that, yeah? The dust of life. See? Conceived in hell and born in strife. See how the sound is much darker. It's not that bell, so to speak, that belt. You might have noticed also that when singers perform in a classical format, the vibrato is present constantly. While you do belt, when you belt, usually the sound is fixed and then you release it, and thus the vibrato comes out. Now, I always say in singing, you don't mess with two things. You don't mess with the vibrato and you don't mess with the tongue. Why? Because that means trouble. It's going to, in the long run, it's going to cause trouble. So this is more a question of feeling it. It's the same as you tell me the larynx. Oh, now for belting I need a higher larynx. Well, if you start consciously thinking that you need a higher larynx, you are gonna smash your voice to pieces because you're gonna run out of runway. You're gonna run out of space. And in fact, there are articles around. For example, I had some, in my research, I can't access it, but it would state that a sensation of a lower larynx is proper, for good belting. Okay, so don't get confused. Now, how do we develop this belt? And these can be very helpful for example, females that immediately they shift gears and they go from chest to head way too soon. Basically, we scream, right? So we use yay. Now, if you start using yay and it gets shallow, then you're gonna be in trouble. But if you use yay thinking through your bottom teeth, you would be surprised with the results. So if we start on bottom C, for example, yay, 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 okay? Yay, 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 yay. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm keeping it open, and that's an F sharp, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's belting. notice my larynx is not popping up like nuts. If I were going to, I would cover, yeah, 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 immediately the sound would be darker and would have that legit quality, which means a bit more stretched folds than that of belt, because it's an open sound. If I continue, yeah, 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 yeah. So you have that sort of squillo, but it's like, yeah, yeah. It's an open sound, and that's your G. That's the other conception that people have, especially people that do not sing, that belting sounds higher, especially for women. Why? Because again, they are bringing the call of the voice much higher, higher, than their speech sort of level, and immediately they feel that's super high. When they shift to head voice, that problem is gone. If you hear, for example, "I Dream a Dream" from Les Mis, right? And I'm gonna do it in a higher key. By the way, Steve Barton sings an amazing rendition of it, even though it's a female song, right? But you start here, "I dream a dream in time gone by." That's sort of a very speech quality to the voice that's required for belting. I dreamed that love would never die. So I release only at the very end. Die. I dreamed that love would be forgiving. So I am sort of, belting doesn't have to be loud the entire time, even though belting is actually for yelling, is like singing the house out, but it doesn't have to be. And you're gonna notice, for me at least, you're gonna notice that horizontality of the sound in vowels, in front vowels such as A and E. So for example, when you go to the I still a dream it come to be me, but there are dreams that cannot be. If I were singing that in an operatic way, now that is your balance for belting. It's not yawning in the sound and making it or vertical, unless you need it, unless you really need it. So for example, when you go in a Phantom of the Opera, you have the music of the night, and you have that A flat, right? I think it's A flat, or maybe it's a G sharp, same thing. One sounds higher than the other, if I were all operatic on this, let your dreams where you want them to be. So I would do this, and it would sound very operatic. If you listen to, I don't know, Wilkinson, Colm Wilkinson, or you hear to, if Steve Barton, it's gonna sound a bit like that. To be. It's more an is an E, and again, it doesn't have that sort of vertical quality that operatic or classical singing demands. Okay? Alright, I'm gonna see how I edit this, and maybe I'll do a second part of it along with crooning, because they are very, 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 very I don't know, interrelated somehow. But I really hope this helps. If it doesn't help, please don't watch it. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribe, and the whole bell business, And if you need help, you know where to find me. Okay, so have a nice day. I hope I don't fly away with this wind today. Looks like I'm in Chicago today. All right, have a great day. See you soon. Bye.